Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by Mr. Christoph the XO. Hey!
Hello. Thanks, Dale. Or Captain, sorry. Glad to be here. Glad to talk about more history.
So we finished up the last theater last time, so we're going to move right along into the next one. So we're going to go back to the Northern Theater, but this time to the events taking place after Saratoga. After General Burgoyne surrendered his army after, the Battle of Saratoga, in October of 1777, guess who enters the war?
1777. I want to say the French.
Correct. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah. I was paying attention, Dale.
They enter the war recognizing the United States as a sovereign country. That's all we ever wanted.
Yeah, come on. Give us a break.
So France, they dispatch a fleet and a army across the Atlantic to aid the Americans in the fighting. And of course, they also pursue some other military operations in the Caribbean and the East Indies. And we'll get to that later down the road.
All right.
France also applied pressure on Spain to enter the war. This did happen, but not until 1779. But, Spanish actions in other theaters helped to stretch the British resources. And you get that stretching going, it's not going to work well.
Right.
So these changes forced the British to shift their attention away from North America, moving troops, ships, and resources to defend the West Indies, India, and pretty much a lot of their other colonial possessions. And they also had to pull people back home to guard against a threat of a French invasion on Great Britain itself.
Yeah, they're right there.
They are right there.
Right there.
Yes. Just a channel of water separates them.
That's right. Practically a puddle.
Nowadays, a bridge. Or a tunnel. A tunnel. It's a tunnel.
It is a tunnel. It's a channel. I think the only tunnel.
The British withdrew from Philadelphia in 1778 and made New York City the headquarters for the North American Theater of War. They embarked on a southern strategy in which they sought to gain control over the colonies of Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Virginia, where they believed loyalist sentiment to be the strongest. So this formed the bulk of military activity in North America for the rest of the war. But, occasional other battles occurred from British strongholds in Quebec, New York, Rhode Island, and Nova Scotia. So after the consolidation, the British began recruiting American loyalists and native allies in a huge amount of numbers. This was to make up for their lack of their own troops. And they used them on pretty much what were just raiding expeditions against Patriot settlements on the frontier. They also used their navy to launch raids and amphibious assaults against the New England coastline. So on the American side, of course, the strategy widened after France entered into the war. They were still dominated by a large British army, which kept the Continental Army on the defensive outside of Philadelphia and New York. But when the British left Philadelphia and the French fleet arrived off of Philadelphia, they were like, you know what, guys? Let's go on the offensive.
Nice.
So, New York. Each side made, sent out probes and did diversionary movements, which was to try to keep each other on their toes and to, do feints to confuse everybody. General Clinton, he sent troops to, quote unquote, clean out the nest of rebel pirates at Little Egg Harbor in New Jersey. In the Battle of the Chestnut Neck, which happened October 6th, the British destroyed some American supplies. And then on the 15th, surprised Pulaski's Legion in the Little Egg Harbor Massacre. It's never good when a battle is described as a massacre.
No.
As a diversion to try to draw attention away from that raid, Clinton also sends troops into northern New Jersey. 12 companies of British Light Infantry, led by a guy named Charles Gray, surprised and slaughtered a sleeping company of American dragoons in what is called the Baylor Massacre.
It's 2 massacres in a row.
Yeah. 12 days apart from each other.
Well, that's not good.
No. In May of 79, Clinton captured the outpost at Stony Point in New York. This location guarded one side of a major crossing point on the Hudson River. When he weakened this force to provide troops for William Tyrone's coastal raids, Washington, he thought up of an attack to regain the position. This was the Battle of Stony Point on July 16th. The fort was stormed by a guy named Anthony Wayne and his light infantry, which forced Clinton to withdraw his forces back to New York. And that's where he started his planning for his invasion of the southern states. Later in 79, a guy named Light Horse Harry Lee led American troops in a raid on Palace Hook, which is in present-day Jersey City. And this weakened British control over northern New Jersey. In early 1780, a British attack against an American outpost in Westchester County resulted in about 50 American casualties and 75 POWs.
Ooh.
And this was the Battle of Young's House. The last battle in New York that really anybody talks about was an attempt by the British to regain control of northern New Jersey in June. They attacked the main Continental Army camp at Morristown. This was a British Hessian attack by a guy named Wilhelm von Kipsheisen.
Wow, that's the most Hessian name possible.
And this was blocked by the Americans at the Battle of Connecticut Farms on June 2nd. So Wilhelm attacked a second time on the 23rd and was defeated at the Battle of Springfield. He was defeated because a guy named Nathaniel Greene got there with 2,000 troops.
Wow.
After this, the British were like, you know what, guys? We really don't want New Jersey. And if you listen to the New Yorkers, nobody wants New Jersey.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, we love New Jersey.
Yeah, we do. The podcasters you are hearing right now love every single one of the 50 states. Every single one.
And hopefully
even
soon,
New Jersey.
And hopefully soon, maybe there'll be 52. Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico.
Yeah, but how are they gonna adjust the flag? What geometric shape will allow for 52 stars in a way that's nonsense? You know what I mean?
Oh, they're smart people. They'll figure it out.
All right. I'm sure there's a mathematician that's just waiting for that to happen.
Or maybe they've been waiting so long so they can add an entire row at a time.
Oh, nice. That's not a bad idea. So like 55 states.
Yeah, maybe. So, July 21st, 1780, Wayne and 2 Pennsylvania brigades and 4 cannons, they attacked a Loyalist blockhouse at Bull's Ferry. This was the Battle of, you guessed it, Bull's Ferry.
Yeah, that was my guess.
Yeah. The English endured an artillery barrage, and they did repel this attack. They inflicted 15 KIAs and 49 wounded, and only suffered 21 casualties themselves. So let's go over to the coast. The northern coast didn't really see much in the way of military action after 1777, even with the British executing a number of different raids against the coastal communities of Connecticut and Massachusetts. The arrival of the French fleet caused a flurry of activity, as you can well imagine. A guy named Major General John Sullivan had been sent to Rhode Island to organize an attack on the British-occupied Newport. The British raided his supply caches and destroyed military defenses and pretty much damaged a significant amount of communities on Mount Hope Bay. But Sullivan's efforts did become part of the first major attempt at Franco-American cooperation.
I often wonder how that happened on the ground or at sea, depending, because I know that, most Americans at that time spoke English and most French spoke French. And I know French was, I think, the international common language of sorts. So how does one communicate? Or do you have to have special interpreters, or are your captains bilingual? How does that happen?
Well, back in this time, I believe lots more people than today are bilingual and trilingual. And, they have very talented tongues.
Indeed.
I don't think communication was too much of an issue. I'm sure there were lots of people who spoke multiple languages.
All right. I guess it's sometimes difficult for me to put myself in the context of 200 years ago. So
try harder.
All right. 250 years ago, sorry.
Try harder.
I will try harder.
Let's see. So, because of bad weather and poor communication, French troops arrived, but they were not really used. And also, the Americans were in retreat at that point in time because of a failed siege at Newport. They fought an inconclusive battle with British forces in the Battle of Rhode Island. So General Clinton, he grabbed troops from New York, wanting to support the New York garrison. But, he arrived off of Newport after, the Americans retreated. So instead, he decided, you know what? We're still here. Let's do a raid. Ooh, New Bedford looks really good. And you know what? Martha's Vineyard looks ripe for the taking.
You got to name your city something less appealing. If you have New in the front, New Jersey, New York, New Bedford, that's going to sound appealing. Vineyard, there's going to be wine. It needs to be like Dump City or Crap Town, or, you know what I mean? Just kind of Junkville, maybe? I don't know.
Then they'll think you're trying to hide something with those names.
Oh, is that too on the nose?
Yeah.
Maybe something banal or benign. Let me think about that. Come
Like
up with some.
Austin or Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's like, what is this? Los Angeles? What's that, some kind of Spanish city? They don't wanna mess with that.
Houston. So he also orders a number of raids on the Connecticut coast. The most devastating was against New London in 1781. There's your
New
theory
London?
about New.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And this was led by the one, the only, the traitor, Benedict Arnold.
Oh, Benedict.
In the summer of 78, military planners on the British side in London, because of course, planning things in London is much more efficient than planning them, on the continent where it's happening.
Right. Especially pre-telegraph.
They began to develop plans for a new loyalist settlement in Penobscot Bay. A expedition was organized in early 79, and on May 30th, a fleet carrying troops and supplies left Halifax. And they arrived about 2 weeks later. The British established a series of fortifications on the east side of the bay. The state of Massachusetts then led a expedition to drive the British out. The expedition ended in disaster because they did not, get too much support from the Continental Congress. An entire fleet was destroyed, with nearly half of the expedition's forces killed, captured, or wounded.
What does it take to be declared a massacre? That's pretty bad. And I know we had 2 massacres previously in this episode.
I believe the definition of a massacre in this context would be just indiscriminate killing of non-combatants or unarmed people.
I see.
When you come in and you just completely wipe out, say, 150 guys sleeping,
Yeah. Okay. That's true.
that'd be a massacre.
Okay. Question withdrawn. That satisfies the definition for me. Thanks.
You're welcome. So this was the worst defeat of an American naval force until the 20th century.
Wow.
The failure of the expedition was attributed to a lack of well-defined command between the land and naval components. And a guy named Commodore Saltonstall, he was unwilling to engage the British fleet that arrived to help the British troops. Yeah, that's kind of pretty much. Yeah.
That I don't know. Okay, that's unwilling. So what is he doing there?
We'll get into the naval battles of this theater after we're done with the brief synopsis.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's like a high-level flyover, and then we're going to dive deep. Gotcha.
Yeah, we got about 10 battles to cover.
Holy moly. I'm sorry for the constant interruptions. Continue.
So let's go over to the frontier real quick. After Saratoga and before Burgoyne's campaign, Quebec's governor, a guy named Guy Carleton, had previously restricted their use in Quebec territory. Carleton was, however, ordered by the Secretary of State, George German, to expand recruitment. We're talking about Native Americans.
Oh, okay.
So Carleton was like, okay, let's do this. So he grabbed John Butler at Fort Niagara and told him to get going. Let's go recruit some guys. So some of these guys joined Burgoyne, and others joined Barry St. Leger on a raid, on a siege of Fort Stanwix in August of 1777. Also, Native Americans were there at the Battle of Orangstee. This was mainly Native Americans. This was fought mainly by Native Americans on the British side. And on the American side were Tyrone County Militia and some Oneidas. And this exposed fractures within the Iroquois Confederacy and marked the start of a intra-Iroquois civil war.
Oh my gosh.
So there, of course, were still tribes that wanted to remain neutral, but there were also vocal, very vocal guys who wanted war. This included the Mohawk leader, Joseph Brant, and of course John Butler was there with him to help convince many of the Iroquois, particularly the Seneca and Cayugas, to take up arms for the British. These forces were pretty much mainly led by war chiefs named Cornplanter, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to do my best. Sayanquiragata.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, don't patronize me.
I'm not patronizing, I'm supporting you.
Although Brant did lead some Mohawks and a small force of loyalists known as Brant's Volunteers. So, down to the valleys. There were forces engaged in destructive raids on the outlying settlements of New York and Pennsylvania in the Mohawk, Susquehanna, Delaware, and Upper Hudson River valleys. These operations were primarily under the leadership of Butler and his son Walter, and under the direction of one of the war chiefs. They were supplied by the British in Quebec and also sympathetic loyalist and Indian communities. These raids sometimes crossed into the territory of present-day Vermont. This was territory that was formerly claimed by New York, but had recently proclaimed independence from New York after, they couldn't agree on stuff. So...
Yeah, that happens.
13 colonies were like, we want independence from Britain. And Vermont was like, we want independence from New York.
The more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yes. The frontier settlers organized militia to defend themselves and were supported by a few Continental Army regiments based at Fort Schuyler, Cherry Valley, and the Wyoming Valley. These defenses were largely ineffective at preventing the raiders from acting, but communities were sometimes warned of impending attacks by friendly Oneidas, most of whom sided with the Americans. In 1778, Brant recruited a mixed force of loyalists and Iroquois and started his frontier raids with an attack on Cobleskill, New York. And the Senecas operated in the Susquehanna River Valley, driving settlers out of present-day Lycoming County. Pennsylvania, in a series of actions that became known as the Big Runaway. The Butlers and Senecas joined forces in early July to attack the Wyoming Valley. Now, Brant was not present, but atrocities claimed to have been committed there contributed to his reputation as a monster. And the Senecas were outraged at false accusations that they had committed atrocities.
Do we know the answer? Did they or did they not?
Everybody committed atrocities.
Even you?
I wasn't here. I wasn't there that time. At that time,
not that
so
time.
So no.
Okay, great
No.
answer.
Brant joins forces with some of Butler's Rangers to attack German Flats in early September, And New York authorities responded to his activities by destroying the Native American towns of Unadilla and Wanaquaga in October. I'm sure that wasn't right, but these towns had been used by Brant and the Butlers as bases of operation. Brant and the Butlers and some Senecas joined forces to take revenge by participating in an attack on Cherry Valley in early November, in which as many as 30 non-combatants were slaughtered in the aftermath.
Dude.
Here we're going with the massacres again.
Yeah, this is what I appreciate is that you're telling it kind of how it unfolded, even though some of it's just really discouraging, you know, from a humanity standpoint. Just like, why are we doing that? That's unnecessary. But that is the way history is and probably will continue. So thank you for being clear.
There's always going to be slaughters like that in warfare. That's happening right now.
Right.
In any war zone. Non-combatants who are still in the war zone still get slaughtered today. Not cool.
No.
So the British forces from the Montreal area, led by a guy named Major Christopher Carleton, raided communities in the upper Hudson River Valley in October. The Sullivan expedition that happened in 1979, this was organized because of the brutal frontier warfare that we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. And the Continental Congress called the Army to take an active role. So in 1979, Washington sent General John Sullivan on a punitive expedition.
Punitive?
Yes. Punitive. So we know what that means.
Oh, yes.
Sullivan and his troops systematically destroyed Iroquois villages, successfully driving the Iroquois north into Quebec. There was really only one major battle during this expedition, where Sullivan's forces defeated those of Butler's and Brant in the Battle of Newton.
Wow.
Brant, he led raids that specifically targeted the villages of the Oneida and Tuscarora, because these guys supported the Americans. And the destruction of the Native American villages on both sides effectively depopulated much of the Iroquois territory, as the survivors of the raids became refugees. But at the end of it, Sullivan's expedition was a failure because the objective of stopping or reducing the frequency of the frontier attacks didn't happen.
Right. Whew.
So the Butlers continued to attack New York frontier areas while Brant became more active on the Western Front. In early April of 1982, Ann Hupp defended the fort of Miller's Blockhouse against a Shawnee Indian attack for over 24 hours while 8 months pregnant.
Whoa.
And after her husband was murdered and scalped.
I tell you what, every time I think I'm stressed in life, I have to think back to this moment where an 8-month pregnant lady fought off a Shawnee attack after her husband was scalped and murdered. Or murdered and scalped. Not sure which. That's... Ooh.
So even after the preliminary peace was agreed to in 1982, Brant tried to continue the war, but was forced to stop when the British stopped supplying him. He was like, I don't care about peace settlement. I'm going to keep going. Oh, I'm out of bullets and nobody's giving me any more. I guess I'm done.
That's why you have to have multiple passive income streams.
Don't tell him that. We don't want him to continue.
Oh, sorry. I'm glad they're not listening to this podcast.
All right. So let's talk about the battles a little bit, shall we?
All right. Let's.
The Battle off Fairhaven. So on May 13th, the HMS Falcon caught 2 Patriot vessels whose owners were both from Sandwich, Massachusetts. A guy named Jesse Barlow and Simon Wing. A group of about 30 Patriots from Fairhaven were led by Captain Daniel Eagerly and Captain Nathaniel Pope of Fairhaven in the sloop Success of 40 tons.
Sloop was named Success. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a sloop.
Yes. I thought it was the sloop's success, like the sloop did something successful. So I was waiting for the rest of that sentence. Apologies. Continue.
You're forgiven.
Oh.
They went to retrieve the 2 vessels captured by the British by a guy named Captain John Lindsay, who was the Royal Navy commander of the HMS Falcon. Falcon had 14 guns and 110 men.
Ooh.
The Americans won and took the first naval prisoners of the war.
All right.
13 British, 2 were wounded and 1 passed. And the people of Fairhaven went on to capture additional British ships, privateers, and others operating out of the Fairhaven continued to be a thorn in the British Navy's side throughout the war. So that's all the information we have on that. So the Battle of Machias. This was pretty much the first engagement of the American Revolutionary War. Well, the first naval engagement, I should say. This took place on June 11th through the 12th in 1775. So on June 2nd, Jones's ships arrived in the port of Machias, while the Margaretta was delayed retrieving the guns from the Halifax wreck. Jones met resistance from the community by refusing to sell his pork and flour unless he was allowed to also load lumber for Boston. In a meeting on June 6th, the townspeople voted against doing business with Jones.
Really?
This climate led Jones to ask Moore to bring the Margarita within firing distance of the town. This prompted the town to meet a second time. This time, they were like, you know what, guys? We're going to do the trade.
What's that expression? You can get a lot further with a kind word and a gun than just a kind word?
Diplomacy by gunpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So they brought the Unity in and docked her at the wharf to begin unloading. So after the vote, Jones announced that he would only do business with those who had voted in his favor of trade. And, this ticked people off. A guy named Colonel Benjamin Foster, who was a local militia leader, he talked with the militia from neighboring towns, and we're like, you know what, guys? Let's go get and capture Jones. They had a plan to seize him at church on the 11th. But this failed because Jones noticed the group of men approaching the building. Jones was like, yeah, that does not look good. I'm out. And he ran into the woods, where he stayed for 2 days.
Smart. That's why you always want to go to church by the woods.
Yes. So Moore and his second in command were also attending the services, but they managed to get back to their ship. So some of the militia were able to board the Unity. They removed the remaining supplies, but they also took her sails. Others went around on land near where the Margarita was anchored and were like, you need to surrender. Moore refused. He was like, I'm going to shoot the town if this keeps going. This threat was really an empty threat. Because, he wasn't a complete piece of garbage.
That's good.
But more importantly, Margarita only had a couple of guns that were really able to fire a large enough round to really do anything. So other militiamen rowed out to the Polly, where she was anchored downstream from the Margarita, and they tried to tow her into the harbor. This failed because she ran aground.
Ooh.
They think probably because of low tide.
Okay.
So Moore, when he sees this, raises anchor and comes alongside the Polly, intending to rescue her. So there's a brief exchange of gunfire with the militia on the shore, and which really didn't do much of anything to either side. But he was like, you know what, guys? Let's just get out of here. And he raised anchor and went back further downstream again to where he felt safe. So the next day, the Machias guys, they regroup, and Foster takes about 20 men to East Machias, where they commandeered the Falmouth Packet, which was a local schooner. The remaining men commandeered the Unity. They re-rigged her, installed some planks as a makeshift breastwork, and armed themselves with muskets, pitchforks, and axes.
Pitchforks. Nice.
And then they go out after the Margarita.
I've often gone out after a margarita myself, so I feel like I get these guys.
Wrong type of margarita.
Oh? Continue the
Yes.
story and we'll find out.
Well, Margarita's already been described as a sloop.
Yes. Maybe I'm after sloops. No, that's not true.
Anyway, Moore had brought aboard a pilot, a guy named Captain Tolby. They grabbed him from a sloop that had been anchored overnight, and he was just trying to get the heck out of there. Now, the Margarita was like, you know what, guys, we just need to get out of here. And they tried to leave. They jibbed into brisk winds, which unfortunately broke away the main boom and gaff.
Wow.
This crippled her navigability. So, because of this, once in Holmes Bay, Moore captured a different sloop. And they removed its spar and gaff to replace the ones that broke on the Margarita.
That's pretty cool.
Also, captured its pilot. A guy named Robert Avery of Norwich, Connecticut. So the Unity was crewed now by about 30 Machias men. And they elected a guy named Jeremiah O'Brien as their capitan. They set sail to chase down the Margarita. And because the Unity was much faster at sailing, they quickly overtook the Margarita, which her being crippled at the time helped quite immensely.
I bet.
Now, the Falmouth Packet was also, chasing them down, but it was not as fast, so it lagged behind. Some historians say that both of them engaged the Margarita, but others say, no, that didn't happen. So we're not exactly sure whether the Falmouth Packet was there or not. Some historians claim that the Falmouth Packet either ran aground or just didn't catch up, period. So, Moore, looking behind him, sees the Unity approaching and was like, full sail, guys. So they set full sail and they actually cut away their boats to try to get away quicker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you don't want to be towing anything because that'll just slow you down.
Exactly, right.
So the Unity pulls closer and Moore opens fire. But the Machias crew was able to avoid that cannonade and pulled alongside the Margarita. It took a couple of tries, but they were able to tie alongside the Margarita and board her. They were like, we're not going to do this back and forth cannon stuff. We're coming aboard now.
That's pretty skillful.
So John O'Brien and Joseph Getcher leads the boarding crew. Both sides engage musket shots, and Moore tosses hand grenades on the Unity until Samuel Watts takes him down with a musket shot to the chest.
Oh, that'll take you down all right.
This is where some historians argue that the Falmouth packet is able to pull alongside the Margarita, and then both crews combined take down the Margarita.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we don't know if that actually happened. So the guy now in command of the Margarita is Midshipman Stillingfleet. He ends up surrendering the crew and vessel. Moore is taken to the home of Stephen Jones for medical aid, but ends up dying the next day. At least 3 other members of Moore's crews are also killed, as well as Robert Avery. He was the colonist that was captured when they took his stuff to make the Margarita navigable again. The remaining crew members of the British schooner were held at Machias for about a month and were eventually handed over to the Massachusetts Provisional Congress. There were reports, more than likely just exaggerated, that as many as 100 British men died in this and other skirmishes in the Machias area. Now, the Machias people lost 2 men, named John McNeil and James Coolbruth, and 3 others were badly wounded but survived. These were John Barry, Isaac Taft, and James Cole. Thing about John Barry, he was a tough SOB. He had a musket ball enter his mouth and exit behind his ear.
Oh my gosh.
And he survived that.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. So the Machias community, they are now expecting the full wrath of the British Empire to come down on their heads.
Mm-hmm.
And so they immediately petitioned the Massachusetts Provisional Congress for guidance, supplies, and assistance. They organized a defense of Machias and maintained vigilance in the event of British retaliation. Jeremiah O'Brien, he immediately outfitted one of the 3 captured vessels with breastwork and armed her with the guns and swivels taken from the Margarita and changed her name to Machias Liberty.
Nice.
We don't know which one of the 3 boats were converted, but there you go. One of them was. In July of 75, Jeremiah O'Brien and Benjamin Foster captured 2 more British armed schooners, the Diligent and the Tatam, whose officers had been captured when they came ashore near Bucks Harbor. In August of 75, the Provisional Congress formally recognized their efforts and commissioned both the Machias Liberty and the Diligent into the Massachusetts Navy, with Jeremiah O'Brien as their commander. Following rumors that an assault on Nova Scotia was being planned, with stores stockpiled at Machias, a small British fleet carrying 1,000 men attempted to take Machias in August of 77. But the locals successfully fought off the landing. Now, the rumors were only partially true. The idea had been proposed, but no planning had actually been taken. During the war, Machias and their people refitted and armed a variety of ships, including the Margarita, and sailed off looking for battle with the British. Jeremiah O'Brien and John Lambert were both commissioned into the Continental Navy, and the Machias Liberty and the Diligent were used to intercept merchant ships supplying the British in the siege of Boston. John and Jerry O'Brien built a 20-gun ship and began privateering under an American letter of marque. Jerry was unfortunately captured off in New York in late of 77, but he was able to successfully escape from prison in Britain and continued privateering throughout the war.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
The British Naval Command was continually frustrated by Machias seamen during the war, and by the use of Machias as a staging point for militia actions in Nova Scotia. Graves more than once attempted to subdue Machias. He gave commands in 76 to, quote, proceed to reduce Machias. And then he ordered Sir George Colliner to, quote, go destroy Machias.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, he went from the polite, just reduce it, to go destroy it.
Well, reduce seems like just the polite way of saying destroy. You know, just kind of.
It is.
You know.
Yeah, he went from politeness to, ah!
Well, let's see what happens.
One British officer, presumed to be Colliner, said, quote, the damned rebels at Machias were a harder set than those at Bunker Hill.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a compliment if I've ever heard one.
So that was the Battle of Machias.
Nice. Well done, America.
Any thoughts on this battle?
What was that ship? The Skidamagoosh or whatever? I really liked the name of that ship. I just wanted to put that out there. Didn't say it at the time. Want to make sure it's on record. Beyond
Okay.
that, just the hijinks of things that proceed and how they're trying to pursue other people. It's interesting. Like when they took the sails of the ship, I can just picture that in my mind, going down to the dock and getting a bunch of people. These sails were enormous, and just like bring them down, take them off the ship, and how involved and laborious that must have been. But all these methods of trying to stymie the enemy, you don't think about those a lot of times. Usually it's just the shooting parts that you think about. It's cool. I don't know. There's something about that that's... And then also the historians are not sure whether the... What was it? The Falmouth was able to... Well, you were
Which
saying
boat
that...
was converted?
No, like, did it catch up? Did it hook up alongside? Or were they even in pursuit? We're not sure. I think that's just indicative of... You think that as time goes on, we'd have better records or better information. And it's kind of like... That could have just been a rumor from way back when, and fake news pervades throughout time. So,
Well, if they don't have records, they can't know for sure.
Right, but it could have just been a rumor, like you said. It could have been it. Some of them thought they did, and you know what? We don't know.
We don't.
But I appreciate people saying, you know what? We don't know, instead of, well, I'm just going to stake a claim on that we do know, and it's this, even though it could be completely wrong. So, I don't know is an okay answer, y'all.
There you go. All right. So, that's where we're going to leave it this week. Next week, we're going to get back into the battles. We have more battles to go.
I'm going to be on the lookout for towns and locations with nice-sounding names like Fairhaven. Of course, it's going to get attacked. It sounds like a nice place that you can get a lot of good stuff.
You're going to attack them?
Well, Fairhaven was the subject of an attack this episode, right? Or maybe I'm misremembering.
I thought you said you wanted to attack towns.
I don't.
Well,
Similar like you didn't do the war crimes back then.
We need to go back to the recording, because I could have swore you said you were going to start attacking towns.
I'm going to be on the lookout for when these battles are mentioned, which towns are attacked and what their names are, because my theory, I want to see if it's consistently good. I am not, for the record, listener, I am not attacking towns. Unincorporated places maybe, but not towns.
Oh, so you want to attack unincorporated places?
I don't want to. But, if my hand is forced, I have to do something, right?
We're going to have to keep an eye on you.
That's fair.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to bring us to the end of the episode, where we're going to honor one of our fallen heroes with the help of HeroCards.us. So today we are going to honor Private First Class Estill R. Skeen. His hometown was Dandridge, Tennessee. He served in the U.S. Army, 120th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division. He received the Purple Heart. His date of sacrifice was September 29th, 1918. Killed in action in Bellecourt, Picardy, France. He was 22. So, near the small Tennessee town of Dandridge, nestled along the Douglas Lake in the Smoky Mountains, Estill Ray Skeen was born on November 6, 1895, to parents James and Minty Bell Skeen. With war raging in Europe, Estill registered for the United States Army on May 29, 1917, at age 21. He listed farmer as his occupation and described himself as tall and slender. Skeen was assigned to the U.S. Army's 30th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Old Hickory Division, in honor of Skeen's fellow Tennessean Andrew Old Hickory Jackson. Jackson became a national hero after leading troops from Tennessee and the Carolinas during the War of 1812, and would later become the 7th President of the United States. Members of the 30th wore a red oval shoulder patch with a blue edge forming the letter O, with an H inside the oval for Old Hickory. Inside the H were the Roman numerals XXX to reflect the 30th Division. PFC Estill and his 120th Regiment, 30th Infantry Division, were sent to northern France in the 4th year of World War I. There they engaged in brutal trench warfare against the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. The Allied powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Canada, Japan, and the United States, were at last turning the tide against the German army in France. The Hindenburg Line, near the border of Belgium in northern France, was Germany's last zone of defense on the Western Front. In the early morning hours of September 29, 1918, near the town of Bellecourt, 100 miles northeast of Paris, in northern France's Picardy region, Colonel Sidney Miner was commanding PFC Skeen's 120th Infantry Regiment. Colonel Miner captured the anxious first moments of the bloody assault on the Hindenburg Line. Quote, "At 0430, all troops were ready, and the slow passing second each seemed an age. At 0545, we stood with watch in hand. Could the seconds never pass? At 0549, all were still, a deathly silence. As the final second came, the thunder of all ages seemed to break at once. The earth trembled, and the flashes of hundreds of guns in the early dawn gave it all a fearsome aspect." In an article commemorating the 100th anniversary of the battle, the History Channel describes the 56-hour-long bombardment. Quote, "Australian, British, French, and American forces participated in the attack on the line, which began with a marathon bombardment using 1,637 guns along a 10,000-yard-long front. In the last 24 hours, the British artillery fired a record 945,052 shells. After capturing the St. Quentin's Canal with a creeping barrage of fire, 126 shells, 500 yards of German trench over an 8-hour period, the Allies were able to successfully breach the Hindenburg Line on September 29th. Private First Class Estill Ray Skeen, age 22, was one of the brave soldiers lost on that day. Because of PFC Skeen and his fellow soldiers swarming from the trenches, the formidable Hindenburg Line was broken. The war to end all wars would be over within 6 weeks, and Western Europe liberated. Star News Media reports that one member of the Old Hickory Division, Thomas Mosetti Lee of Clinton, North Carolina, wrote, quote, "They fought like seasoned veterans, like warriors they fell. They stormed the battlements of death. They charged the gates of hell, and laid the haughty legionnaires of Hindenburg's spine. And the world sang Yankee Doodle when the Yanks broke the line." PFC Skeen was laid to rest with his fellow soldiers at the Somme American Cemetery in Bonny, France. Plot A, Road 24, Grave 3. So, Private First Class Estelle R. Skeen, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Christoph, take us out.
All right, yes, sir. So, listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate that you're here. If you ever want to get a hold of us, maybe you heard something that was a little off, or you just want to say, hey, thank you very much, we're cool with either of those. There's a couple ways to get in touch with us. Number one, you can email us. The email address is usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter/X. The handle is @USNHistoryPod. We also have a Discord. You can find the path to said Discord in the show notes. Join us, interact with us, let us know how you feel about things. And then, as always, we're on YouTube. You can listen to us there as well. And in any of these venues, feel free to comment and rate what you think of us. We take your praises and criticisms seriously. We want to try and produce a good product, and we thank you again for joining us. So, Captain, back to you.
We also want to announce that if you subscribe to our podcast through Spotify, we are putting out bonus episodes for you guys for supporting us. So if you want more of us, then you can support us and you will get more episodes.
Yeah, baby.
So with that, we want to wish everybody fair winds and following seas. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.